Welcome, class. Pastor Ron was at a different church last Sunday and has asked me to do this week's lesson. My name is Wilf Kazmaier. I taught high school chemistry and physics for most of my career, and now I'm retired. I want to start today by asking you two questions. The first question is, what is the best month of the year? Now, my mom is still alive. She's 98 years old. She's the last of her generation. And I put this question before her because she's pretty sharp and pretty wise. I asked Mom, what's the best month of the year? And she thought about it a while. And she said, July or perhaps April. Now, your answer depends a lot on your circumstances and where you live. Mom grew up in Germany, so when she says April, she means spring. I don't think she's ever gotten used to the Canadian weather. As a Canadian, though, I think it's safer to say May. April can be a little bit uncertain. But the answer to the question, the best month of the year, is quite debatable. Is it April, May, June, July, August? But then I asked her the second question. What is the worst month of the year? And she answered without a moment's hesitation. She said the worst month of the year is November. Now, I argued with her a little bit. I said, isn't January the worst? January is colder than November. Well, she answered, no, January, every day, the days are getting a little bit longer, and you're closer to spring. But in November, every day gets a bit shorter, and spring is a long way away. Mom is pretty sharp for 98, isn't she? Today it's November, and here in Canada, the snow's covering the ground and it's icy out there. So I want to share you some thoughts on the month of November. Not only the month of November, but I want to talk to you a bit about the season of life of November, in other words, old age. Now, for some of you, you may be in the midst of old age, and other of you may not, but I hope to bring you some words of encouragement, no matter how old you are. You might complain, though, that perhaps I don't have the credibility to talk about some of this. Certainly, I do have some of the issues that you get in old age. I have a little bit of arthritis. I no longer can play squash like I used to. But I can play pickleball. I'm still driving. Things are going pretty good for me. Maybe they're not going as well for you. Who am I to talk about the infirmities of old age or life in general? Well, understanding that I lack credibility, I've brought an expert with me. Someone who is, as the Bible said of Jesus, well acquainted with grief. Her name is Annie Johnson Flint. Annie was a poet and a hymn writer of over 100 years ago. You may know one of her most famous hymns. It's called He Giveth More Grace. You can look it up on the internet and get somebody to sing it for you. I won't bother trying that this morning, but I do want to read you the words of her hymn from her hymnal. He Giveth More Grace by Annie Johnson Flint. He giveth more grace when the burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength when the labors increase. To added affliction, he addeth his mercy. To multiply trials, his multiplied peace. You may not recognize the chorus. His love has no limit, his grace has no measure, his power has no boundary unknown unto men. For out of his infinite riches in Jesus, he giveth and giveth and giveth again. Do you recognize the hymn? To really appreciate Annie's hymn and the poems, and we're going to look at one of her poems this morning, you have to know a little bit about her life. So let me give you a quick, shortened biography of Annie Johnson Flint. Annie was born on Christmas Eve in the year 1866 in Vineland, New Jersey, to Eldon and Jean Johnston. A little sister and lifelong companion arrived when Annie was 3, but unfortunately, their mother, Jean, died shortly thereafter from childbirth. 2 years later, when Father Eldon was dying of an incurable disease, he gave the girls up for adoption to the Flints, hence their last name, because he wanted the girls to be raised in a Christian home, and the Flints met that description. Annie accepted Christ personally at an early age of 8. And for the next few years, they were very happy. She had a wonderful childhood and youth. She went off to college, trained as a teacher. She got a 3-year contract to teach primary school. But then tragedy struck. Both her adopted parents died within months of each other. And then she developed juvenile arthritis. The doctors said it was incurable, that she would be an invalid all her life. She had to give up her career and was bedridden for more than 40 years. And remember, this was the 1800s, a time without the benefit of modern painkillers. Being crippled and being a Christian, she believed that God had set her aside for a purpose, and she began writing poetry. You can find her poetry easily on the internet. I did. They were a witness to many and a blessing to many, including me. She died in 1932 at age 65. So when Annie writes in her poem and hymn, He giveth more grace, when she says, burdens grow greater, added affliction, multiplied trials, she knows what she's talking about. She also knows what she's talking about when she says to the affliction, God addeth his mercy. To the trials, he added his multiplied peace. This is not false optimism and wishful thinking on Annie's part. This was her daily experience, God's grace, strength, mercy, and peace. She is very credible to talk about these issues. So let's look at her poem, The Gray Days of November, and it'll become the text for us to follow today. I'll read you the first part. The Gray Days of November by Annie Johnson Flint. The gray days of November no plaint from me shall win. I shut the fog and mist all out, and shut the fireside in. I draw my chair the closer to where its warm glow cheers, and dreaming in the firelight, dream back across the years. You'll notice that Annie starts and she says, I'm not going to complain about November. It's inevitable. Instead, she does something about it. She just pulls her chair closer to the fire and dreams back over the years. Now, I remember when we were children, at least in my experience, we didn't complain about winter or November. It just sort of happened. And as soon as the snow came, we built our snowmen and snow forts, or we'd put on our skates and play some hockey or go tobogganing. We made some great memories, and we had no regrets. I know I'm a bit more apt to complain now. Maybe it's because I have to go driving, get my winter tires on, and so on. But Annie would say there are things about November that we can cherish. For one thing, hot drinks taste better. Time to pour yourself a hot cup of tea or coffee or chocolate, whichever you prefer. It's better in November. And it's even better if you can share it with some friends. Great time to have someone over for tea, isn't it? And that you may have more time in November. Summer, you've got to cut grass and pull weeds. You got to plan and go on that vacation, and then you got to recover from that vacation. November is less hectic than December. It's a great time to recall God's blessing and dream back across the years. And he goes on, no happier days, no better, my lost youth gave to me, with flowers in every meadow and songs from every tree. That was the time of growing. This is the time of rest. Bloom falls, but fruiting follows, and each in turn is best. In every season, God gives us blessing. I have an apple tree out back. I love it in spring. It looks gorgeous when it's in full bloom. But I have to take a real quick picture of it because that only lasts about 2 weeks and then all the blooms fall off. But the apple tree is not finished. It's spending the rest of the summer and into the fall growing apples, producing fruit. And that's what God wants of us as well. The blooming may end early, and the bloom falls, but as Annie says, fruiting follows. And that will take time. It's a good time to be growing fruit. You know, the seasons of life change so quickly. Annie goes on and says, God giveth of his glory an ever-changing view. The old things pass forever. He maketh all things new. Life knoweth here no beauty that shall not fade away. Some better things he sendeth, and these are mine today. Life knoweth here no beauty that shall not fade away. For those of us who are older, do you remember when you realized that you'd gotten old? I can remember the exact day and moment when that revelation hit home. I was visiting in Germany and riding on one of those nice intercontinental express trains they have. I love those things. They go 300 kilometers an hour. And I was dragging my carry-on bag down the narrow aisle there. And coming up the other way was a young woman with her daughter. And the woman said to her daughter, Lass den alten Mann vorbei. Let the old man pass. You know what I did? This is the truth. I turned around. I wanted to see where this old man was. There was no one there. And then it hit me just like a Damascus Road experience. She's talking about you. You are the old man. It's obvious to everyone, even complete strangers. You just haven't realized it yet. Well, I had to own it. I am now an old man. Everybody knows it. But you know, getting older is a series of losses, and it may surprise you how early those losses begin. I had a good neighbor, Randy Chevier. He played professional football in the Canadian Football League for the Calgary Stampeders. We used to sit on Randy's porch or on my deck, and one of our favorite topics was planning for retirement. Well, I was in my mid-50s, so I had a lot of thinking to do about that. And Randy was in his mid-30s. Isn't that surprising to be in your mid-30s and thinking about the end of your career and doing your retirement planning? But if you play pro football, you have to. Do you realize that the average career length of an NFL player is 3.3 years? It's a very short season. Now, I looked up on the internet the topic, the age at which you peak. You know, life goes up to a peak and then it starts to decline. And you'll be surprised what some of those are. It will not surprise you that muscle mass and strength peaks at 25 and bone mass at 30. And that's why you don't see very many people playing pro football in their 40s. They reach their peak in those earlier years. And if you play table tennis, it's even sooner because reaction time starts to decline. Table tennis players peak at about 25. Here's one. I've noticed I have trouble remembering names. As a teacher, That's a skill I used to have. I don't have it anymore. When do you think you peak at your ability to remember names? When do you start forgetting names? According to science, the age is 22. Ah, that explains a lot. It's not my fault I can't remember your name. I've been forgetting names since I was a young man. And even more early for the downhill path is learning languages. When do you peak at your ability to learn a new language? The answer is 7 years old. I know this for a fact. I was born in Germany, and by the time I was 3 years old, I had a flawless knowledge of speaking German. Then my parents took me to Canada. And in the next year, year and a half, by the time I was 5, I could speak flawless English. I had learned 2 languages, 5 years old. The only problem was my mom took us back to visit the grandparents in Germany when I was 6. I'd forgotten all the German I ever knew. And my wife tells me I've never really gotten it back. Isn't that something? 6 years old and you're already struggling with memory loss? There was one other thing that peaks that I found interesting. Life satisfaction. When do you think, when they do the surveys, and of course this isn't the same for everyone, but generally speaking, when does life satisfaction peak? Well, science says it peaks at 23 years old. Now that kind of makes sense, right? At 23, for most of us anyway, you may be finishing your studies and so on. You may be learning starting your new job, getting an income. Maybe you found that special girlfriend or boyfriend and you're looking to spend your life with. Good times, right? Peaks at 23 and then satisfaction starts to go downhill. But this is the only one that goes downhill and then it goes up again. It has a double peak. When do you think life satisfaction, according to the surveys, has a second peak? According to science, life satisfaction peaks a second time at 69. That's marvelous. I'm 69. Life is good. Again. There you are. So, life changes. But I ask the question, is there anything that does not fade away or pass away? Well, the Bible says there is. In 1 Corinthians 13:13, at the end of that wonderful chapter on love, it ends this way. And now these 3 remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Let's get back to our poem on November. Remember, Annie had said, life knoweth here no beauty that shall not fade away. But then she says, some better things God sendeth, and these are mine today. And she lists them. It's worthwhile looking at every one of these. She says, now that I'm older, mine is the riper wisdom that comes with graying hair. Mine is the fuller knowledge of God's great love and care. Mine is the clearer vision. Mine is the wider view. And mine the hoarded memories of friendships kind and true. I kind of like that phrase, the hoarded memories of friendships kind and true. You know, I've hoarded a lot of my old slides and photos. They're in boxes upstairs. I think I'm going to go back. I've always wanted to do this. Maybe now I have the time. I'm going to digitize those old slides, which I can do, and look at all the old photos. But I think I'll go back as I go through them and remember the friendships I had, how blessed I was with their friendships kind and true. I'll remember that the love of God was shown through them. Some of them have already passed on, but it could be an entire time of praise and thankfulness as I look at each one of those pictures and remember those hoarded memories. And I will tell you that this getting old is also a great season for giving love and experiencing love. When I visited my parents in the seniors' residence, I was so impressed how many opportunities you have every day to speak to someone who's lonely and encourage them, and to make new friendships. It's a great time for love. And what about your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren? Love does not fade away. There is more opportunity to give and receive love, even as we get older. Then Annie goes on in her list. Mine is the steadier patience to bear the ills of life. Mine is the sturdier courage to meet the daily strife. Mine is the faith serener than ever youth could know, to walk the way appointed through sunshine and through snow. The Bible tells us that faith lasts, and I would say faith grows as time goes by. There's certainly a lot of opportunity to practice our faith. I know I may never be a world-class tennis or squash player. That train's left. But I haven't gotten to the end of growing in my patience. In fact, I'm not very good at it. But I have a suspicion there's going to be lots of time to practice my patience. And what about courage? Don't you need more courage in this season of life? And faith to meet the daily challenges? The Bible says, have no anxiety about anything, but everything. Through prayer and supplication, let your requests be made known to God, and you'll experience God's peace. Do you think there are a lot of things coming up where we are challenged not to be anxious, but to bring them to God in prayer? This is a season of faith. I have been looking at Bible verses, and I have a new category of Bible verses. I call it finishing well, because the Bible has instructions for all the ages of our life. In Titus, for example, there's instructions for young men, for young women. There's instructions for those who are in leadership positions. There's instruction in the Bible for those who are working on a day-to-day basis, and there are instructions for older men and older women. I'll let you find your own Bible verses that fit your circumstances, but this is the one I've been working on. Titus 2:2. Teach the older men to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled, and sound in faith, in love and in endurance. Well, there's the agenda. There's the challenge for me now. Will I be sound in faith, in love, and endurance? Every age of life has its challenges and its opportunities. And another one of my verses that I have under the finish well category, Psalm 71, verses 17 and 18. Since my youth, God, you have taught me, and to this day I declare your marvelous deeds. Even when I am old and gray, do not forsake me, my God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your mighty acts to all who are to come. Even when I'm old and gray, I have a prayer that God would walk with me through this phase as well. And I have a mission to declare to the next generation what God has done for me so they can be encouraged by it. There's one more thing that doesn't fade, and that is hope. Let's go back to our poem. And he goes on. The gray days lead to white days of peace and silence deep, a stiller hush of resting when earth and I shall sleep. What's she talking about? When earth and I shall sleep. Well, she's talking about death, which we all must face. Now, if Annie had been a secular author, the poem would end right there. and probably have a footnote, well then, rest in peace. But as a Christian writer, Annie has another stanza. It goes on like this. The gray days lead to white days of peace and silent deep, a stiller hush of resting when earth and I shall sleep. But then, a glorious waking when broken ties all mend. Through gray days of November, I wait the long year's end. And this is our hope. It is a hope that lasts, that at some point we will again have a glorious awakening, and that all those broken ties which we experienced with friends who went before, that those ties will be mended. I want to close by reading Annie's poem from one end to the other and get a sense of it, and then our lesson is over. Listen to it again. The Gray Days of November by Annie Johnson Flint. The gray days of November no plaint from me shall win, to shut the fog and mist all out, and shut the fireshine in. I draw my chair the closer, to where its warm glow cheers, and dreaming in the firelight, dream back across the years. No happier days, no better, my lost youth gave to me, with flowers in every meadow, and songs in every tree. That was the time of growing. This is the time of rest. Bloom falls, but fruiting follows, and each in turn is best. God giveth of his glory an ever-changing view. The old things pass forever. He maketh all things new. Life knoweth here no beauty that shall not fade away. Some better things he sendeth, and these are mine today. Mine is the riper wisdom that comes with graying hair. Mine is the fuller knowledge of God's great love and care. Mine is the clearer vision. Mine is the wider view. And mine the hoarded memories of friendships kind and true. Mine is the steadier patience to bear the ills of life. Mine is the sturdier courage to meet the daily strife. Mine is the faith serener than ever youth could know, to walk the way appointed through sunshine and through snow. The gray days lead to white days of peace and silent deep, a stiller hush of resting when earth and I shall sleep. And then a glorious waking when broken ties all mend. Through gray days of November, though I wait the long year's end. I hope it's your experience that faith, hope, and love last and grow in this season of your life. Until next time, thank you.